talking about personal success and purpose now, you've talked about that, but from a personal perspective, you have, you're in a very competitive industry, both from a sort of, an agency perspective, but also the people in it. It's a very creative industry, so a lot of people want to work there, right? You've got to the top of your industry. What are some of the things that you do differently? Do you just work harder? Are you smarter?
No, not smarter. Well, first of all, I'm not the top of my industry. I'll start there. I don't think there is a top. I mean,
Sure.
Nelson Mandela on his 90th birthday had a birthday party involving all the leaders of the time, and he did a little speech, and he asked any questions, and George Bush, the younger W, put his hand up and did a, "Hey, what next, Nelson?" was his question, and I got a laugh, and Nelson, deadpan, looked him straight in the eye and go, "George, what next for me is what's next for everyone in this room. Climb a higher mountain."
Brilliant.
There is no top. It doesn't exist. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think what distinguishes people who go through and find themselves in leadership positions, they work really hard. I don't think there's any substitute for hard work. But I think we heard it earlier, that it has to start with a love of what you do, passion. A passion, commitment to the cause, understanding defining the cause, and then, so the purpose thing. What is the cause? I'm committed to it. And then the third one is you may not feel it now, but humility is this sense of, look, it's just me, I've just got a point of view, I could well be wrong. This sense of don't believe the hype. Spend time with spend time with understand every level of your organization and your customers. Because that's where the assistant comment earlier, that's where the insight and understanding will come from.
Talking about love of what you do, you love what you do, right? Because in The Independent, talking about the Cadbury Gorilla thing, I'm going to quote you on The Independent. It says, when advertising is done well, when advertising is done well, I can't think of a better business. And I quite enjoy the slightly maverick stance of taking on the naysayers, the tutters who say, you can't do gorilla drummers. Well, tut away, my friend, tut away at 9% increase in volume. Right?
I've had quite a few coffees. I think there's got to be a sense of gladiatorial was used earlier. The word I quite like. You got to name your enemy. You got to choose an enemy, even if you don't really feel that way about them. I think any competitor needs to identify an enemy and focus in on them. It brings out the gladiator, and you're going to compete better that way. Sometimes I find myself, it's not a great habit this, but sometimes I find myself almost deliberately choreographing a sense of wild incandescence or rage or a sense of injustice in order to galvanize an energy force in a room to really accelerate out of whatever situation we're in. And I think I like, there's always people who say, advertising politicians and estate agents are generally not very high up in the food chain of careers, and people, I'm so sick of, advertising's dead, and well, yeah, it should be. Most of it should be, because most of it's rubbish. And it's overpopulated. There's over 300 agencies within the M25. The average margin is 3%. It's a nonsense. But you have to ask yourself, why is that? Is that if you take the Darwinian forces of commerce, it's not because the suppliers are idiots. It's because there's a lot of buyers out there buying stuff that they don't really know what they're buying. So they allow this industry to be wildly overpopulated and full of nonsense. But within that, advertising advertising it's a terrible noun because we assume it's all old. But ideas, like I said earlier, I think they're more valuable today than they've ever been, because of the sheer ability to transmit them and communicate them and share them.
It's interesting you mentioned, final question from me before we go to the floor, it's interesting you mentioned about the element of hard work. Because there's books out there, like things like the 4-Hour Work Week. I don't know anyone that does a 4-Hour Work Week. I haven't read the book. Maybe I should. Where basically where it basically says you've got to focus on your strength and the most important things and delegate, outsource the rest. But who I see is you focus on your strengths and things you love to do. A, it's not really work, and B, if you love to do it, you wouldn't want to do it just for 4 hours a week, right? So as long as you love doing what you're doing, you don't mind working hard and later on into the evenings if you need to do so.
Yeah, I find the work-life thing interesting because it's such a blurred boundary for me, which sounds really sad and pathetic, and probably is. But I really love talking about. I love the strategic challenge, the intellectual challenge. I love narratives. I think each brand is like a political party, and I think discussion, debate, it's stimulating, it's interesting, and creative minds that challenge you and kind of jolt you into seeing things slightly differently is very energizing. So a good day at work is the day is as energizing as going out with mates down the pub and having a really good laugh. It's just as energizing. So, you know, I don't know, 4 hours, whatever. I just think if you love what you do, you throw yourself at it, you don't notice the time. Time drifts by.